All right, welcome everybody. Schuyler Williamson here with the next kind of version of our What's Happening in Austin. I'm without my counterpart, Jennie Lee. She's actually on a vacation far, far away, so we're happy for her and what she's getting to do. But it's going to change the format a little bit for this episode. Mikey and I were chatting, and rather than go for the current topics, I think what we're going to do is Mikey's just going to ask me some questions that I don't know what they are, and that's kind of the common theme with all of these. I don't know what the questions are before they're asked on camera, and we're just going to make it about the market. You know, what happened in 2023, what we expect to happen in 2024, and just see where the conversation goes. And of course, you know, at any time, if you guys had your own questions, you could type those in the chat box, and then, you know, we could take these offline as well. So love the interaction, and hopefully we can bring you some good content that's interesting and empowers you for 2024.
Awesome. Yeah, so the first question that I kind of have is did 2023 pan out the way you envisioned? So at the end of 2022, I know there was a lot of expectations of what 2023 would be. Did it kind of pan out the way you thought?
Man, the truthful and humble answer as a business owner is no, it did not. We had some goals for ourselves that we were going to sell a certain amount of homes, and we had a little bit of expectation management because 2022 it started to slow down a little bit. But I did not, and most of the experts that we spoke with didn't expect it to last as long as it's lasted. And I think, you know, looking back in the rear view, it kind of makes sense, right? When people are going for the soft landing approach, and you know they're not getting super aggressive one way or the other, just to see if we can coast into an easy flip of the economic situation. It makes sense. It would draw it out. You know, if we're not going to crash and burn, and if we're not going to like immediately turn around to go up, if we're going to kind of do this gradual decrease toward what we hope, you know, we'll get back in the long-term steadiness, it's going to take time. I didn't think that it would take a whole year. It has. It has affected our numbers, but it's affected the whole board's numbers. You know, I think we're selling about half as many homes as folks would expect us to. And homes are still selling, and we've gotten a good piece of that as a company, and I'm grateful for that. But it wasn't, as a business owner, it wasn't the amount that I thought we would sell.
Okay, well, was there some really unexpected elements of it, or was there some things that you did expect?
Yeah, you know, I thought that the buyer would get used to the current environment a lot faster, and the reason why our market has been slow is because our buyer demand is so low, and I think that, again, you know, looking back, it makes sense, but what we've noticed is the buyer's activity level is really tied closely to consumer sentiment, and that's the one metric. If you look at the economy and kind of the smart people's measure of things, that's the one thing that's just continued to go down and down and down. Is the consumer not only is unhealthy, but they're super pessimistic about what the future looks like. And, you know, people don't buy homes when they don't know what the future looks like. You know, it's a very large financial decision, and you want a modest amount of certainty when you're going to spend that much money, and we don't have that certainty right now. We haven't been able to produce it as a government or as a leadership, you know, and even locally, we haven't been able to produce what we think it's going to look like in the future. So that's caused the buyer to slow down, and that has driven the majority of what's happening in our market. And I personally thought that the buyer would get used to the high rates, that companies would kind of figure out what their future is going to look like by mid-year this year, and it just wasn't the case. I think last month, if you look at Indeed and their tracking of available jobs in Austin, last month we had a little bit of an increase. So maybe it's a bottom for the jobs, and maybe we're going to go back up from here as at least a city, but we don't know. And I think that's the point of it all, is we don't know what the future looks like. You know, even rates, you know, today the rates are at 7%, which is a lot better than where we were, and we hit a real peak, and we've come down over the last couple of weeks to what we think now is a really attractive point. But I don't know that would prevent the buyers from buying. I think it's the consumer sentiment, and that's just drug out much longer than I thought. So I think that is a determining factor, is just the lack of buyer that's out there. For us as a business, we've been able to generate leads pretty consistently. We've been able to have appointments with interested buyers and sellers. We've been able to list homes for sale. And we've been able to take buyers out to buy. But the common thread is the buyer is not super motivated to make anything happen unless it's an absolute deal for them. And I'm talking about the middle of the market home, right? And then the seller, they have their number that if it goes below that number, then they'll just lease it. I mean, they make it a non-emotional thing. They don't have to buy wherever they're going if they're leaving Austin. So they'll just lease it. And we've had a number of transactions where the seller was more than willing to sell for a price that they thought was aggressive. The market didn't bear that because the buyer's not super motivated. And you know what? We put it for lease and we lease it. So it's that has been the determiner. I think buyer motivation is the biggest determiner in this market today.
So I guess what you said about consumer sentiment, is that still at the point it is today? Is it still very low and decreasing, or is it?
Oh yeah, it's at the consumer sentiment is at its lowest levels, kind of in the past 30 years. I mean, there's been a couple of points in the last 30 years where consumer sentiment got super low, but we're right there. In that last 30 years, we're right there at the bottom of what sentiment has been, and it's on its way down. I mean, something could happen that would point it back up, but we've got inflation we still have to deal with. We've got a job market that is super uncertain. We've got two wars that. There's information that we can go and consume about those wars, but there's no real clear path forward, and just all those things adding up, it's tough. The credit for America was downgraded, which it's not a good thing for us. There's just multiple things that just kind of infects the mind of the consumer. So it's on its way down now, and we need leadership to step up. We need some good things to step up to kind of curb that. And certainly rates decreasing are some good news that we can grab onto, but it's got to be more than that.
Okay, so that kind of leads me to the next point: is sort of what were the biggest lessons that you learned in 2023 in regards to both real estate and maybe wealth building? So yeah, on the consumer side and on the real estate side.
Yeah, on the consumer side, it's just very clear to me now that I call it my war chest, but like having a savings account that allows you flexibility as a business owner, and really as a human being, to take advantage of opportunity even when you're not making a whole lot of money. It's more clear now to me today than it was a year ago, because we as a company, we have continued to invest, we have continued to be aggressive in growing our business, and we're doing it kind of in the face of less revenue that we had a year before. And if we didn't have our savings established the way that it was, then we wouldn't have that flexibility. So I think as a consumer and as an investor, that was something I knew, but it's reinforced now. And going into the future, I may even have more savings set aside for a time like this. In business, I think, man, it's not necessarily a lesson learned as much as it is just a confirmation. But when you go to sell a house in a market where the buyer is not motivated, then you've got to have your house looking great. You've got to advertise it as aggressively as you possibly can in all ways. And then you have to price your home to sell ahead of where the market is going instead of where it's at now or what it was. I think that we've had, we've had some sellers that we've educated on kind of where we're at, where we're going, what the situation is, and the seller is in control of selling their house. We're there to be consultants. We're there to get it sold and to provide that service, but we're not there to dictate what the sales price is, and I think that it's very clear the people that got ahead of the market and priced it to sell. And it's very clear to me the folks that priced it to see what they could get. And you don't want to be the one chasing the market down. You just don't want to do that. If you want to sell your house, and you have to sell your house, then you need to get ahead of it and price it that way. And I think, some of the conversations I had with very smart people is we don't have to sell this house. If we can get this number, then great. But if we can't get this number, then let's lease it. And even if we got to lease it for 2-3 years, this is the number that we want to sell it for. And I think that's great. I mean, that's a smart decision. It's got boundaries to it, and it's got a plan around it. And we executed the plan, get it leased. I mean, to me, that's fine. But yeah, I think that lesson of pricing appropriately to the market that we're dealing with, it's just been driven home. I mean, there's very, very little forgiveness right now with buyers. Like they're just they're where sellers were 18 months ago, where there was very little forgiveness with sellers. Like if they didn't get what they wanted, then they'll just wait because a week later they'll get another offer, if 12 hours later they'd get another offer. The tables have turned now. So we've got a little bit of a spoiled buyer on our hand that has options. The option to wait. We've got to make it worth it to them.
It's really interesting that Austin kind of has seen both polar opposites, right?
Well, and it moved fast.
Yeah, I mean, so quickly.
Yeah.
Do you think that could happen again to flip to the other side, or is that something that?
No, I think the whiplash of aggressive one way and then aggressive another. I mean, we really don't want that as a market. But our market is so efficient now with technology and information being available, and a pretty savvy buyer and seller now. I mean, just because there's so much information readily available, the sellers and buyers, even though they only do this a few times a year, they're pretty savvy. So they get it. They know how it's done. So we don't have to have months of learning where we're at. We get there pretty quick, and I do think that there is potential that we could move from one direction to the other very quickly. If we had a recession, and the government took corrective action by dropping rates and made and then it trickled its way down to mortgage rates, right? And it became cheaper for buyers to buy homes. I do believe that there is some pent-up demand in our market for buyers. I mean, I think there's some buyers that are sitting to see what's going to happen, see if the market's going to dip any more, and see if the rates are going to drop any. And then if those things happen, they'll jump in. And I think there's more of that than maybe we're anticipating. And it looks like we have a lot of inventory right now because buyer demand's so low. But the number of homes, it's not that high. It really isn't that high. So if the demand goes up, our inventory will shrink pretty quick. And supply and demand, when the supply goes down, there's upward pressure on prices. And so we could have a little bit of that. I hope that that's not the case. I hope we can ease into it one way or the other. It's a lot easier and a lot healthier mentally for people to kind of handle that. But there's a chance that it could happen. I mean, it happened 12 months ago, so it could happen again.
I guess that kind of leads me to the next question is sort of what are some of your expectations for 2024? And then are there things that maybe people might want to keep their eye on if they're planning on selling, buying, etc.?
Yeah. Expectations for 2024. I do think it's going to be another slow year at least for the first 6 months. I think that buyers are going to continue to be cautious. I think that economically we still have some work to do. And if you look at, there's some tools out there where it predicts what the Fed's going to do. And if you look at those tools, the prediction is that the Fed will keep rates where they're at through May. And then June is the most probable month where they'll start to drop their rate. So the Fed and the powers that be who create these tools and these statistics, they believe that something is going to happen between now and June of next year where they can start to let up on things. So I think that there is, if we just play data and probability, we sort some things out between now and June of next year where maybe it looks a little worse before it gets better. And then things start to recover in June. So we'll have a better second half of the year in 2024 than we do the first half. I think the first half is going to look similar to what we have now, although, typically seasonality-wise, demand falls to the end of the year, and then at the beginning of the year it starts to go up again, and then we peak kind of in those summer months. It's going to feel similar to what we are now, but we're going to have some seasonality, so it'll start to pick up a little bit, and then maybe we'll see rates fall in June, and things become more affordable, and we can get back into a normal kind of 2 to 6% appreciation in prices annually, and I think that's what everybody wants, is for it to just stay under control, and if we can get it back under control where it's a little bit of a balanced market. Then we'll sell more homes. We just need it to be predictable. So.
Cool. So those are the questions I had. I mean, did you have any closing thoughts on what's going on in Austin right now? Is there anything that stuck out to you?
No, I just think that, we've said this a number of weeks in a row, but if you're a buyer and you don't have to sell a house to buy a house, and you want to buy a house, I think that it's an extraordinary time right now to do that. I don't know if it's going to be the best time in the next 6 months, but it is a great time right now. And sellers are very willing to negotiate. They're very willing to get creative with how to make the deal work for you. If you just want it to be a lower price, they'll do that. If they want you to buy down the rate, they'll do that. I mean, they're very willing to work a deal. So I think if you have any kind of motivation to get started with your buying journey, I think you get started. I mean, I think you do that. And then on the other side of it is selling your house. We totally can get the house sold. We just have to have it looking good. We got to have it priced well. You're going to be emotional about it, but we've got to try to control the emotions with the data as much as we can so that we set ourselves up for success. And when we set ourselves up for success, then we will be successful. But it's a very different operating environment today than it was 18 months ago or when you bought your house. So we gotta adjust to that. I mean, when I was in the military, I didn't get to go into battle and say, okay, enemy, I want you to do this so that I know I'm going to win. No, I mean, you fight the enemy on their terms, and you just hope that your terms and how you proceed against the enemy is better, right? And I think that selling a house, although a little silly the way I presented it, you got a tough enemy out there right now. So we've got to acknowledge that, and we got to work the situation to the best we can to get it done. It's either that or lease the house out. That's the way it is. All right, yeah. Hey, appreciate you all getting on. Obviously, my phone number and contact information is online. I would love to connect with any of you about the Austin real estate market. And we got one more of these before the end of the year, and we hope to continue to bring value to you and just be there for you as your resource. So thanks for tuning in.